Hey, good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's April 18th, also known as Tax Day. Rob just reminded Dan and I. The day when the federal government takes money out of your bank account in order to hold down inflation. Not to pay its bills. Nope. Just to hold back inflation and motivate you into certain behaviors. If you want to know more about that, join us on Thursday when we talk about economics. But today, it's Politics Day. Transgender battles going on, attacking transgender children. Do the Republicans want to be about? Clarence Thomas apparently is funded by a personal friend, which I understand. If I too would like to be funded by a personal friend, that would be great. But I'm not a Supreme Court justice. And a bunch of other issues that are going to be important for our politics today. Doug Pagitt in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where in the last week it was 87 degrees and snowed, and now today it's that is true. Actually true. That's I'm into exaggeration, but that is not one. That is actually true. And Robb Ryerse, somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, in an unknown location.
Yeah, and it's beautiful here in Arkansas. Absolutely beautiful. We did have a stray cat adopt us, which this is not the first time this has happened. We had two cats join the family maybe a year and a half ago, a couple of kittens, and now it seems that their step sibling of some kind has decided that they're going to live with us too. And so we had a cat just run into our house and begin eating cat food.
Oh, into the house.
Into the house, yes.
Yeah, I saw your post on social media where it looked like an outdoor cat. And I was like, yeah, that's normal.
It is. Yeah, it is mostly an outdoor cat. It's only been in the house the one time.
That's how it starts, though, Rob.
Yeah, I know. Vanessa, my wife, is adamant that this cat is not joining the family.
Good for her.
And she feeds it.
Well, two things can be true at the same time. Your therapist tells you on a regular basis, right? Both things can be true. Yeah. Well, may the cat find a welcoming home.
We are. I say we. I am taking suggestions for names. If anybody in the comments would like to, it's a black cat, very fluffy. Black cat with green eyes, taking suggestions for names if anyone has any ideas.
Go away. How about that?
It's not a bad one.
I had a friend that named their cat Pisonia, and you asked him why. He said, "Well,
cute.
He does tend."
I like it.
And how are things there in West Michigan?
No cats, but we had snow yesterday, and it was in the 80s the day before. So
Crazyville.
Yeah.
Hey, how's that fungus? I saw in Escanaba there was a big fungus outbreak.
Hey Dan, how's your fungus?
Is the fungus getting up to where you are? Did you see that news story about?
I did actually see. Yeah, there's some sort of weird fungus up in the UP of Michigan, Upper Peninsula. Yeah. Hasn't got down here yet that I know of, so that's good. But it is like resistant to antibiotics and stuff. It's like,
is this like a Last of Us situation?
It's like the prequel to Last of Us. Like, this is the news footage they'll show in the background of the next episode of The Last of Us. Like,
if you don't know that TV show, it's built around a pandemic that starts because of a fungus. And that's not a spoiler either. That's the setup to the show.
The premise, yeah. Fungal zombies. So
no. It's Zombie This Is Us. That's what we call it around here. It's a very emotional show. Yeah. It's about relationships like This Is Us, but it's Zombie This Is Us.
Yeah, it's not about zombies. It's about the relationships.
I did see that third episode,
along the way.
And you guys were right. That third episode was just something else.
Yeah, really good.
Yep. Really, I didn't love the finale, but
haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, it disappointed me a little bit, but
well, has there been a finale of a TV show, either by the season or the total show, that you felt like that was that did it?
Yes,
you have one. You have a finale.
The season 1 finale of Severance,
so good,
was unbelievable.
Can't wait for the next season.
Fair enough. Yeah, right. You're right.
But hey, there's a lot going on in the world and a lot of stories we need to get to today.
Yes.
So we're just going to dive right in. And Doug,
by
I
the
feel
way,
like you're
we
going
are.
to sidetrack us almost
I am
immediately.
right now, almost immediately, right out of the chutes. Just to tell people the news stories today. Call your friends, call your family, get the aunties and uncles over, get the cousins. We are not going to mention the name of the criminal convict from New York. He's not in the news stories today.
Yeah.
What
We're trying to
a
go
relief!
a whole episode without mentioning he
No
who shall
criminal
not be
convict.
named.
Yeah. Just from here on out, criminal convict. I looked for a criminal number, couldn't find one, so apparently doesn't have one. But I would love to have him be a number. But yeah, you are right, Dan. Look, I heard this last week that some of the religious political conservatives have decided and are saying publicly that the issue that they want to run on in 2023 and 2024 for the presidential election is battling the movement to include transgender people in our society. That's the topic that they want to run on. They've been talking about it for 6 or 8 years. They've been ginning up all kinds of lies and distortions about people, and they've chosen it. That's the one. That's the thing that they're going to be getting on. And as it turns out, they have been laying the groundwork for this to discriminate against transgender people in all kinds of bills in state houses all over the country.
Yeah.
In record speed, because this is one of the ways that bills get passed at state legislatures. They're written in with a national view, and then are templates that then different states can just take and change the basic information for that state and insert the pre-written law. And they've chosen to do this now with anti-transgender inclusion legislation, and it's just shocking to me. I think it is morally wrong. It is ethically inexcusable. It is religiously ridiculous. And as a political issue, it couldn't be worse. This country does not want to see itself fundamentally organized around who we don't include. I know that it can feel like that's how the system works, that it's always trying to keep someone out. But that's never a pitch to people. Let's have a country where less people are allowed to participate fully in our life and in our democracy. It is just a terrible idea from top to bottom. If I was only thinking in political terms, because I think Republicans need to sit it out for another 12 years from any kind of leadership, and if the House of Representatives today doesn't show you that proof positive on that, if it was only a political issue, well, I would be cheering this on because it's such a bad political move. But it's not just a political issue. It really does hurt people's lives, damages a lot of people. And that's the point. The intention of it is to try to turn this issue into something by which we should be acting in ways that are discriminatory toward transgender people.
Yeah, the Republican Party has become the party of cruelty, like intentional cruelty. Whether it was the Trump administration saying, we're intentionally going to be cruel, we're going to put kids in cages as a deterrent, to these anti-trans bills that are meant to just bully children. Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. There are, according to a study in 2022, there are 1.6 million Americans over the age of 13 who identify as trans. 1.6 million that's a big number. At the same time, it's not a very big number when you consider that we're a nation of 350 million people. To target such a small percentage of the population to bully, to discriminate against, to use as some kind of horrific boogeyman is just reprehensible.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I would love to, so much of this trans stuff is built on this idea of grooming and the danger to children at the hands of trans folks. And that is just completely made up.
Yep.
And is the height of hypocrisy, because over and over and over again, I mean, it seems like the people who are the loudest voices that are anti-trans, uh, anti-groomer, turn out to be the ones who are doing that very thing. I mean, just this week there was news out of Texas that the proponent of anti-trans bills, in the leading sponsor of them in Texas, because he's scared of the children being groomed, had an underage intern at his apartment serving her alcohol, trying to have sex with her.
Yep.
Like the hypocrisy is just infuriating. And Dan, you're exactly right. The cruelty is infuriating, especially at like such a small population, such a small percentage of the US population. It is just horrific.
Yeah, and it's the same. And it's also the same battle plan that they have in place that they had around LGBTQ, other gay and lesbian
Yes.
people before the acronym, was put together, the list of letters. And look, we have struggled with how to include sexually non-normative people in our society. It's been really hard for the entire time, and we should be getting better at it. What we should be doing is figuring out as a society, how do we engage, understand, and include people who see themselves not in the typical patterns that so many of us expect in this society. Now, we're not good at that, but instead of working hard on that project, instead of working hard on finding ways to understand and to deepen what are just old bad ideas of oversimplicity about men, women, sex, the purpose of sex. I mean, it's really shocking when you listen to the conversation people are having. It returns to a old-timey patriarchy kind of conversation, in which the purpose of sexuality is simple procreation, that there's this notion of a family, none of which the people in this society hold to as the norm anyway. So we have had a changing normative understanding of who's included and what's understood and acceptable in our society, right? That's been going on from the founding of this country, and from the founding of civilizations. People have struggled with this. This is our moment to be better at these issues. And instead it's going the other way. And frankly, it's a little shocking. I mean, to me personally, this feels like a 25-year-old conversation. I know to a lot of people, it feels more recent, and it feels like this has come on out of nowhere. But friends, if you're new to the issue of trans people or non-normative sexual identities, there's a lot of work you can delve into to understand this. It's not as foreign as it might seem. But rather than that, rather than schools and heavens save us, what about our kids' sports teams? I mean, could we please just ratchet back for a minute, that maybe the number one concern is not what kids should be on what field hockey, ice hockey, or lacrosse teams? It is just so petty. So petty. When you think
listen, I mean,
and the spiritual and personal health of people because of bills like this and because of these biases and harms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to crack a joke about my daughter's soccer team, but this is too serious of a topic to joke. I mean,
well, no better joke than the joke you won't tell. So that's
I'm not sure it was a good one either. So,
but that's the thing. You take an already very small population of people who identify as trans, and then you shrink that even more to the people that are trans that are athletes. And so we're talking about a handful of individuals, and these lawmakers are rushing to enact laws that target a handful of individuals.
Yeah, I remember last year when the governor of Utah, conservative Republican, vetoed an anti-trans bill that was meant to keep kids from playing sports in Utah, and he vetoed it, and put out a great statement, and it was really, really fantastic. Deserve a lot of credit for the courage that he displayed doing this. And in that, he said that he had his team research how many trans kids there were playing sports in the state of Utah, and it was 3.
Yeah.
It was like a whole bill to target 3 kids.
Yeah.
So these people won't do anything about gun violence.
Yep.
They won't do anything about childhood hunger.
Yeah, or obesity. Right.
Yeah, they're not going to pay for school lunches. But by God, they're going to get to the bottom of this. Yeah, I just can't.
Yeah, and look, and it's wrapped in a religious narrative. Ernest has a great comment here in the chat. That so much of this is driven by religion, and it is because people tend to wrap bigotry and exclusion in religion. It's true in Christianity. It's true in Judaism. It's true in Hinduism. It's just true. It's true in Islam. So that's a thing, right? It doesn't originate from the scriptures of any of these traditions. It doesn't even originate from the teachings of any of these religions. It's just utilized because it's a more powerful operating force for so many people to do this. And Rob, your point about, the projection that's coming from this work. And look, there is such a fragility in the conservative, socially conservative, religious and political right. The fragility is incredible. And they're so afraid that somehow something is going to be done that's going to tip their child off the path. I mean, it's just true, right? So, and this drives what's being taught in schools. This drives all kinds of concerns that individuals have. Some people who don't even have children yet are concerned about these things. And there's this deep belief that if you hear something or are taught something at a young age, you're going to follow that path. Now, what is just utterly bizarre to me about that is these are the same people who recognize that their own Christian instruction apparently doesn't work, right? How come? Why is it that only hearing about a transgender person or hearing about from a gay or lesbian person in elementary school in Florida is somehow going to turn you into a gay or lesbian or transgender person against your own will and desire? Why is it magic somehow when these issues are raised? And yet all the good virtues that you want to teach day after day, life after life, bedtime after bedtime, none of that's going to work apparently. But one conversation, one book, one kid, one teacher, and oh boy, here we go. Now it's all going to break. It's like this see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil narrative that lives in these folks. And the projection and the fear is just, it's so noticeable. It really does feel like something that needs to be dealt with within the social conservative traditions. And I know the social conservative traditions have been built around this for a very long time. And is often the case is projection. And another story was in the news this week about someone named Ali Alexander, who's a big funder and a big driver for the Stop the Steal work of claiming that the criminal convict from New York won an election that he didn't win. And that person who's leading the Stop the Steal, hard right conservative funder, had to apologize and, by his own admission, bow out of public view because of his texting and grooming young men to be his sexual partners. And this just happens over and over. You can go down the list of the people. You can start with Jerry Falwell Jr. and go right to Ali Alexander and 1,000 people in between who are public figures out on this socially conservative right that are up to all kinds of things that they're warning everybody about.
Yep.
At some point, it's just utterly ridiculous. It's not thou doth protest too much. It's way beyond that. It's like your obsessions and your fears and your self-hatred and your community that doesn't know how to accept you for being someone who you really are is causing you to support things that are damaging all kinds of people. And the data points are just all over the place. It's really, really something. It's just simply stunning. I mean,
Yeah.
from the Catholic Church all the way forward, from the Southern Baptist
Southern
Church
Baptist,
leadership
yeah.
abusing kids to non-denominational church, all across the board, religious people abusing children, and then out asking for laws to stop certain people from expressing themselves. It is just beyond hypocrisy, right? Like, hypocrisy is sort of like, hey man, you gotta square up your math here. This is well beyond that. This is just actual damage that's being done by people for whom it's coming. Look, some of us have said as preachers all the time, all preaching is biography, right? All passion is biography. These laws, they're biography. Dig into them, and what you're going to find out is a whole bunch of people that are damaging others because they feel some level of violence and self-hatred toward themselves, and it's just nonsense. And apparently we're now going to be talking about this, which could be a very good thing, because this is how it normalizes. You guys know that old axiom in movement building that goes, first, about any issue, this can be true, and it's certainly true about this, and I think there's actually, this might be the upside of this, I think 4 steps or something. First, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fear you, then they accept you. And that's something you just see happening over and over. And issues of trans inclusion in our society is following that pattern. Ignorance, laughter, fear, ultimately going to get to acceptance. So this might be part of the process that a society like ours has to go through, but the damage that'll be done between now and inclusion and acceptance is still such a long way off. And somebody bringing this up again this week is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And what I had to Google the other day? I never thought I would Google this, as somebody who enjoys
what did you Google?
A good lime Bud Light. What is the Bud Light controversy?
You had to Google that, Doug, because I texted you on Friday evening along with Dan and our friend Brandon. I sent a text of a very large Bud Light and said, I'm drinking Bud Light because I love America and I hate myself.
Yes. This is,
and you were like, what are you even talking about?
It was like, here it is again. What is the Bud Light controversy? That's right. I'd forgotten that's what triggered it. And I'm like, I don't even get that joke. I mean, I think those two things are true, but I think that you were making
I thought it was a good one.
You do love America and you do hate yourself, but I don't understand what this has to do with Bud Light, which I frankly think is a terrific alcoholic beverage to enjoy. Not much of a beer, but a great beverage in its own right. Just
like
take
the
it as
LaCroix of beers. It's like
totally
beer flavored water.
Yes, it's terrific. But as it turns out, Bud Light, in an effort to want to connect with people in America, Bud Light, again, Anheuser-Busch Corporation, more inclusive than the Republican Party. Wrap your heads around that for a minute. Did an outreach to a influencer in social medias and put a campaign together that sent Bud Light to this person who identifies as transgender, and they made a little pitch about it around March Madness and some of the rest, and they're promoting their beer through this person as an influencer. And by the way, alcoholic beverage companies, if you're looking for other influencers, we are right here waiting for you. I mean, by golly,
you do love that Bud Light orange.
I would. I'd say I could lean into a solid support of the flavored Bud Lights.
Yes, the Vote Common Good podcast brought to you from the Bud Light Orange Studios.
Let's not leave out Michelob Ultra. If they want to make a run for it, we would have a bidding war that could get up into the tens of dollars that we would be paid for pitching that. So anyway, they put out this campaign, and it caused the social conservatives to go lose their minds.
Oh, yeah.
And say they're never drinking Bud Light again, including, and can we just hold this thought for a minute? Rock icon Kid Rock, who apparently Kid Rock now.
I prefer WWE Hall of Famer Kid Rock.
Oh, thank you for that. I didn't know that. Wow. Okay, WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, Hall of Famer Kid Rock, and anarchist leading narrator for We Don't Need No Rules, the guy who wants to, lead the rock revolution and buck authority, that's the guy that apparently is the voice of social conservatism. How did this happen? Is shooting cans of Bud Light because no longer will he drink it if they're going to support an influencer, a cultural influencer who's transgender. That this like guilt by association. I remember so clearly when the social conservatives said Kid Rock is a threat to our children.
Right.
Now he's not a threat.
Yeah.
The influencer on Instagram, who you've never heard of, apparently is such a threat that a sponsor cannot be supporting. And that's caused at least one country music artist to say that he won't be involved with Bud Light any longer. And it's just become ridiculous to the point that Marjorie Taylor Greene now says that Lindsey Graham sends out this picture of Lindsey Graham with a Bud Light in his hand. And it's just turned into utter ridiculousness because this issue is so unrooted in anything significant. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I have two thoughts about this. One related to the Bud Light that Lindsey Graham is holding. There are significant rumors related to Lindsey Graham's sexuality, and there have been stories that have been circulated. There's a particular nickname that he has apparently in Washington D.C. He's known as Lady G. So it is not this swipe at Lindsey Graham from Marjorie Taylor Greene is.
I see what you're saying. It's an insider critique that we may.
Yeah, it's a real brushback pitch of like you need to step back here because we could destroy you. That is there's a lot of innuendo around it that I think I think is significant.
Yep.
The other thing that was really fascinating about this story is that the criminal convict's son went on his podcast, and criminal convict junior,
criminal defendant,
criminal defendant junior went on his podcast and encouraged conservatives to stop the boycott of Bud Light. And all that made me think was, oh, he must own Anheuser-Busch stock. There's got to be something there.
Well, my favorite part is I don't think a lot of these folks know what a boycott is because they're going out and buying cases of Bud Light and then shooting it with guns or running it over with trucks.
Yep.
You're still giving them the money. You're just not enjoying the product.
Hey, here's a great political.
Well, when you begin to go down the list of Anheuser, they're all like, "Well, I'll drink Coors Light instead," or when you begin Michelob Light, or like when you begin to go down the list of corporations who, have indicated their support of the LGBTQ community, just about every single beer company there has done this. I mean, folks are going to be drinking water instead of alcohol if they're going to be consistent with their boycott. Because I mean, even beers that you think of as like kind of conservative. I mean, Budweiser, you kind of think of it as a conservative brand, but like Sam Adams or Yingling, like, I mean, there's not much left to drink.
Yeah. And to be clear, these businesses are not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. Like they've made a business decision and seen that societally we've reached a tipping point where the majority of Americans support trans inclusion.
That's right. There is a market when you sell your product, you would like the entirety of a country like the United States to feel invited to enjoy that product. Nearly every product would want that. The one product that doesn't want that is republicanism. They have decided we don't want some people to enjoy the fruits of our labors. We're going to attack Disney, the destination place of,
can you imagine,
near on all children at some point in their life. And they want to be in opposition to Disney, and now in opposition to the thing that makes Disneyland tolerable for parents, Bud Light. It is a level of just self-destruction, again, over what? Over the idea that transgender people shouldn't also be advertised to buy beer. Mm-hmm. Now you're not even, think about what you're even talking about here now. They're not even talking about what kid gets to play on a lacrosse team, or what locker room or what bathroom is someone going to use by governmental demand. Now they're talking about private industry. Mm-hmm. The current Republican Party tells private industry, you don't get to sell to a sector of our society or we will punish you. It's just absurd.
Yeah.
This is where it has gone. And and look, I know that social conservatives have been up to this stuff nonstop, right? Dan and Rob, you guys could probably tell stories about your own childhood where the social conservatives were wanting to boycott all kinds of nonsense, including Disney back in the day.
Yeah.
But it was never, here's the thing. The social conservatives in Republican circles were always one small fringy wedge of the Republican identity. Now it has become the center of it. That's the problem. Yes, this has been around, but the other Republicans that have always said, okay, we're a big family of conservatives. We're going to keep the social conservatives in with the fiscal conservatives, in with the military hawks and other military conservatives. Like, we're just going to find a way for all of us to be in. And now it's just all given way to this nonsense because these are the bills that they're now trying to pass. This isn't the taxed enough already crowd anymore. This is the anyone not like us is such an assault on our well-being. And we need to harness all of our efforts for the next 19 months until the next election to drive the horrible Biden administration out of office. It's just nonsense. And if it was simply, again, ridiculous politics, we could all shake our heads, but it actually hurts people. And it demands that we all become informed about this kind of nonsense so that we can say things to, otherwise decent people in our lives. And I'll just commend you to our playlist on our YouTube channel, where we have a great conversation with Paula Stone Williams, who talks about her own transition from male to female, writes about it as a pastor and as a leader, and it's tremendous. So if you want to learn more about these things so that you feel more informed and more well versed in the conversation that we have with Paula Stone Williams on our playlist is just really worth it. Or in our podcast, you can also go search the podcast and you'll find it.
Yeah. And Doug, everything you said is absolutely true. It reminds me of words from Barry Goldwater, who was senator from Arizona, Republican nominee for president in 1964, really credited with launching the conservative movement and Ronald Reagan and all of that, and just a low tax, small government, libertarian type of conservative. And this is a quote from Barry Goldwater. He says, "Mark my word, if and when these preachers get control of the Republican Party, and they're trying to do so, it's going to be a terrible damn problem. Frankly, these people frighten me. Politics and governing demand compromise, but these Christians believe they are acting in the name of God, so they can't and won't compromise. I know, I've tried to deal with them." And so these
was
words
it
from
1964? When was that? Do you know when that quote was?
I think this quote was from the early 80s. But Barry Goldwater saw this coming right on the money. It's exactly the situation that we're in.
Yeah. And this is a good reminder that you can agree with someone you don't agree with when they're right about things.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. You can't be wrong about everything all the time, Barry Goldwater. And it turns out good call on that one. A big win there.
Yeah,
all right.
Hey,
well,
before we move on, I want to sidetrack us back to this idea of projection, that these Republican family values guys are almost always up to something. Yeah. So did you guys see this out of Missouri? This Missouri senator's comments on child marriage. Did you see this? So he this is in a state, hearing. They're talking about some different things. This GOP state senator suggests that children as young as 12 should have the right to marry an adult with parental consent. And he voted against raising the minimum marriage age in Missouri from 15 to 16. And someone was criticizing him on the floor, and he said, "This is an exact quote. Do you know any kids who have been married at age 12? I do, and guess what? They're still married." So he's like on the floor of the state government defending child marriage in America.
And I know children who got married in violation of the law, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. Unbelievable.
It
is.
It never ceases to shock me. And it's not like this isn't fringe. No. This isn't an internet troll. This is an elected official at the state level.
I mean, we could do an entire show about like crazy things that were said on like state legislative floors. Doug, I was on Twitter this morning. I saw there was some guy in a yellow suit in Minnesota.
Yeah,
in Minnesota state legislature, ranting,
yellow
preaching
suit.
a sermon. Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere.
The real crime was the suit, but yeah.
Is he a representative or was he?
Elected representative.
Well, let's see if we can get him on the show. I'll reach out and see if we can get him on whatever he was talking about. And
by the way, I don't want to tease things too much. We got some big name guests on in the works.
This is like the joke you're not going to hear. It's the announcement you're not going to hear. This is like the mystery podcast.
What is Rob talking about today?
There are things that you can't know about. I'm really going to like.
We are working on some guests, and we've made some inroads to line up some guests that may surprise you a bit, faithful listeners to our podcast.
Barry Goldwater?
It may surprise me as the producer of this podcast.
Wow, Barry Goldwater would be a big get.
I mean, you'd have to work through a medium. I mean, there's just a lot of things we'd have to do. But
like Ouija board, one letter at a time. Yeah,
I know some people that could conjure that up for us, literally and figuratively. All right, so another big story, which is utterly shocking. Marjorie Taylor Greene not fit for office. There's a headline. Is this Clarence Thomas business?
Yeah.
Look, Clarence Thomas came into public life back in the 1990s amidst his own controversy of, I believe, Anita Hill telling the truth about the way he treated her, the things that he said. I know some other people who have known Clarence Thomas very well for a very long time. They have no doubt about the veracity and truthfulness of those claims. He's been a odd and divisive figure on the Supreme Court the entire time. He's also been the leading voice of conservative political theory in the country. There was a long time when Antonin Scalia was sort of the most public voice of that, but deep inside the conservative legal theory world, it's Clarence Thomas's ideas and writings. And I heard a statistic yesterday that more former clerks of Clarence Thomas were appointed by the former convict or by the criminal defendant. That was really close.
Yeah.
To judicial seats than any other justice. Let me just say that again from the confusion. That Clarence Thomas's clerks represent the highest percentage of any justice's clerks to currently be on seats recently appointed at the federal
Wow.
level, which means that his
Wow.
proteges are all over. So a 40-year process, an attempt to try to make a particular judicial view that Clarence Thomas holds, which is out of step even with the current Supreme Court. That's why he always has to write concurrences or disagreement statements, dissents. Thank you. So look, Clarence Thomas has a lot of influence, and what's become increasingly clear is that his own judgments and his own behaviors are so inappropriate. Most recently coming out with this leaks about his funding or his relationship with a big funder of Republican politics, and how he's gone on multiple trips for decades, 2 decades with these people, and hasn't disclosed any of it.
Yeah.
And the close relationship that he has with people whose intention is to actively be working in the same spaces for which he is a Supreme Court voice of conservatism is deeply, deeply concerning. Turns out the Supreme Court is not going to make rules to rein itself in. They're not going to do it. And so the rest of us now have just another reason to look at the characters who are Supreme Court justices and to ask ourselves, are these really people whose views we can trust? Because if you can't figure out how to write honestly on your disclosure form, can you really read the Constitution with the level of specificity that you say? I mean, it's really pretty basic, right? It's like, it's an aptitude test when you fill out your disclosure form. So either you're lying about it
or you're incompetent.
Or you've chosen to believe something that is not at all in the spirit of the law. I don't, it just feels to me like it's got to be one of those, because there's no way Clarence Thomas wouldn't think the American public would want to know of his close relationship with not only this Crow person, this particular donor, but with a whole range of them. Because Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginny, and by the way, the fact that we know the name of the wife of a Supreme Court justice is also a little bizarre,
because
right?
Because she was heavily involved in an insurrection attempt.
Yes, and was a lawyer for the Heritage Foundation, where she was paid $680,000 salary in a year for a very conservative political group. And when he filled out his form and said, "Did your wife earn any money?" he wrote zero. Not $680,000 was she paid by this foundation, albeit conservative. He just wrote zero. So again, these are not mistakes that a professional person can make.
Doug, it's just a little whoopsie. He's going to amend the disclosures.
Yes.
Who among us hasn't forgot about all that money and favors that?
Yeah, who among us didn't know that your wife earned $680,000 when you filled out a form where they asked you, "Did your wife earn any money last year?"
Wow, this is really triggering the panic I have about doing my taxes later today.
Later today.
Well, don't hurry. Find that button that says extension, and you're going to be all set.
And it's not just that this guy, went on some trips with some friends. This mega donor bought his mom's house and let her still live in it.
Yes.
Bought houses around her house so they could put security guys in those houses and
yes, but
just sketchy.
So what you're getting at, Dan? I mean, play that out for a minute. What happened was that this donor, who's a real estate developer, bought basically the block that Clarence Thomas's mom lives on, including her house, and paid her fair market value for it, remodeled it, and then allows her to live there.
Yeah.
Without paying any rent. How does that happen? That this donor from Texas buys Clarence Thomas's mom's house, just happens to, and a bunch of other houses around it, raises the real estate values, and she just lives there rent-free for decades. And that doesn't count as some kind of influence. I heard some reporters talking about this, and I've experienced this with reporters too. Like, they'll want to get together and doing a story and we'll say, like, hey, let's meet for coffee or whatever. And I'll be like, hey, can I get you something? They're like, yeah, you can't. Literally,
Right.
the professional conduct of a reporter for, big newspapers or news outlets of any size are like, you can't buy my 99-cent or $2.99 coffee because
Where
that
are
would
you
not.
getting coffee for 99 cents?
Are
you taking
there's a
reporters to the
great
gas station?
there's
McDonald's,
a great
that's the senior
hamburger.
discount.
Yes, there's a great hamburger place that serves breakfast all day, and
Well,
on their
not
on
around
their
here,
net
they don't.
on their dollar menu includes a coffee. So
There you go.
yeah, it's really great. You should try it sometime. Family owned. You think you're really gonna love it. So but they can't let you buy them a 99-cent coffee because it wouldn't look right, because that's just what you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you behave and how you function. A Supreme Court justice should figure out how not to have these kinds of relationships that when they come out, people say things like, what on earth caused you, sir, to think that you wouldn't disclose this? Well, the rules don't say that I have. Is that where we are? Are you really such a textual literalist that you don't think that the common that a Supreme Court justice doesn't have to put general hospitality on a form? And you're like, maybe our 9-day trip around Indonesia on your private yacht is not considered typical.
Yeah, that's not, hey, come on over for a pizza tonight and let's watch the game.
Right.
Yeah. But even so, I mean, in all honesty, even so, should Clarence Thomas be developing these kinds of relationships? Because look, we know a person personally whose job it was to find influential donors and introduce them to Supreme Court justices, including Justice Thomas, in order to influence them on particular cases. This person's job and role, and he has testified before Congress about this, was to do this work. That's what he did. And he's not the only one.
Coordinated effort. Yeah.
There's a bunch of people who do this. Clarence Thomas knows this.
Yeah.
And if you can't make friends the old-fashioned way, and you can only make them based on that, because look, what are the chances that you as a Supreme Court justice happen to have billionaire friends that are big, huge donors to certain political causes? Meanwhile, your wife runs political action groups. Now, I'm not into patriarchy and trying to say that a husband's actions need to dictate his wife's. You can say it. You both of you can do whatever you want and be married and share, and you can have totally different opinions. You can have the same opinion. I'm not saying she shouldn't be working because of what her husband does. That's ridiculous. But tell us, don't make journalists who have to buy their own coffee hunt around and find out that you didn't disclose your wife's $680,000 salary working for the Heritage Foundation as an attorney. Yeah. And by the way, that's pretty good compensation. Boy, I'd love to see the compensation package value evaluations around there. What did she do that was worth $680,000? Because maybe it's not too late for us to retool our lives and get a job like that, in some fields. I didn't know those.
Is sell your soul and avoid any ethics.
I have been asking Shelley to go back to law school and see if she could be appointed to the Supreme Court, so I too could have jobs like that. Hey, here's another thing. What does a Supreme Court justice make? A couple $100,000 a year?
$286.
$286. His wife makes $600, so they're making $1 million that year. You can't pay for your own vacation? Really? You know what? Because the rest of us, Clarence, we're paying for our own vacations.
Yeah.
And then, just to be really bickery about this, he's publicly presented himself as someone who doesn't want to hang around the wealthy class. He would just as soon be in a Walmart parking lot with his RV. That's what he says. Wow. And as it turns out, every year he goes on amazing junkets, which, I don't know, good for you after you retire from a job for which you don't want to have undue influence bearing down on you. It is just really, really something.
And it's just shocking that there's no mechanism to do anything about this. There's no ethics committee that oversees the Supreme Court.
And no election.
Yeah. It boils down to John Roberts, and John Roberts is going to go down as, unless he does something in a hurry, as presiding over one of the most corrupt and divisive Supreme Court tenures in the history of our country. And I don't know, John Roberts is one of those guys that he disappoints me every time, but I always have hope for him. I always feel like there's something in there. I remember how we used to feel about Jeff Flake or Ben Sass, and we thought, okay, these guys, or Mitt Romney, we thought, okay, they're gonna, and that's how I feel about John Roberts. And I think he is coming up with he's gonna have the legacy of a corrupt court.
Yeah.
That's going to be
which is the one thing he didn't want. I mean, the irony of all of this, when he was appointed as the lead justice on the Supreme Court, the one thing he said he wanted, and I believe he did, is he wanted there to be integrity in the cases they take, how they rule on them, and how they conduct themselves. It was a big deal to him. And then, as it turns out, he gets 3 other justices, 2 of whom got in because of very sketchy situations, right? One where the Republicans wouldn't pass Obama's Supreme Court Justice, Merrick Garland, and then one where they rushed Amy Coney Barrett at the last minute just before an election. So 2 of the 3 that were most recently appointed are, to a lot of people, they're under very difficult circumstances. And then these behaviors are just something. And it's something, look, as people that want to advocate for the common good in government, which is what we do, and for people to believe that the government doesn't have to be totally wacko and nutty. Today's a tough day for us, right? In that, you look at these bills we're talking about, you look at Clarence Thomas, you look at the hearings yesterday that Jim Jordan put together in New York.
Before you jump into the hearings, let me just say this. As much as I would love to spend some time talking about Jim Jordan and how hypocritical, ineffectual, and criminal, quite frankly, he is, I got to run. And so I'm going to leave you guys to talk about Jim Jordan together. I will. All right. I'll see you all later.
Good luck, Rob. Good luck on the run. Run, Rob, run. All right, so Jim Jordan put together, Dan, this hearing in New York, which was just a total mess yesterday on crime in New York, which really we all know is a cover because they want to now go after Alvin Bragg, right? They want to go after the person that caused the criminal defendant to have to show up. So that's what it's about. It's clear that that's what it's about. And then they couldn't even pull that thing off. Honestly, it was a mess yesterday. They're in New York, but they're buried in the basement of some building where it didn't even look like New York. Like they didn't even have like a New York skyline in the background, just a junket waste of money. And what came out of this, because now this attention put on Jim Jordan, particularly for his role as the chairman of this committee, is that Jim Jordan has 0 bills that he has written. In his time as a congressman, one of the things you do as a congressperson, you make laws. You write them, you whip up people to support them, and you pass them to benefit the American people. Now, I know he's the kind of guy that thinks we don't need more laws, but apparently we do, because we need to pass some laws about transgender kids and adults.
Yeah.
But here's a guy who, as a congressperson from Ohio, has 0 bills. Dan, 0. He has not sponsored a single one. I think you had a statistic of how poorly he has done compared to the other members of Congress.
Yeah, so they did a recent study, judging the effectiveness of the members of Congress. And this study rated Jordan as the 202nd most effective Republican in the House of Representatives out of 205. So there's only 3 people less effective.
And who is less effective? Who is less effective than this guy? So how does Jim Jordan become someone we all know about? How has he become the chairman of these committees? Why is he someone that we should be paying attention to with his, his jacketless look and his finger pointing in our faces? Why? Because he says he's a fighter. Well, what's he fighting for? Yeah. Look, you can fight against stuff all day long, but frankly, the role of a congressperson is not to fight against, it's to fight for. And apparently there hasn't been a single thing that Jim Jordan thought was worthy of his team and his staff writing up as a law for the United States of America. Just ridiculous. And we went to his campaign office in Ohio back in October. Went right up to the door. He doesn't have a campaign office. He only has a congressional office. And for people who don't know the difference, anybody running for office who is a current office holder keeps their campaign process separate from their governing process, right? Because you have to do two things. You have to try to keep your job and you have to do your job. And you try to keep those two things separate, right? It's the kitchen and the bathroom. You put a barrier between them. So very often, almost always, people who are running for Congress have a congressional office and a totally separate set of staff and everything, and then they have their daily work that they do as a congressperson. Jim Jordan doesn't have a campaign office. You know why? No one runs against him. In fact, the one person this year who ran against him was someone who just basically wrote her name in to try to run against him because she thought it was wrong to not have someone be on the ballot against him. So here's a guy who is in a seat that he's not challenged in a primary as a Republican, and he has literally or virtually no Democratic opponent. So he doesn't have to run for office. And as someone who doesn't even have to run for office, what does he do as a congressperson? Not write any laws. And then he has the nerve to run a committee that calls other people in front of that committee and demands that they answer to him about why they're so ineffectual about things he thinks they should be effective in. It is just utterly amazing that people get away with this stuff.
Yeah. And just like, if you think the Democrat Party has bad ideas, offer better ideas. Like, offer better bills. Like, if you think inflation is a problem,
yeah,
put together a bill that addresses inflation. But they don't. They don't have better ideas. They're just against, like, fake boogeymen, like trans kids playing soccer. Like,
yeah. And the big things that he wanted to be about, getting rid of Obamacare, didn't happen.
Yeah.
Didn't even write tax law. Like, here's a guy that could have at least written like a tax something, cut some tax and get it to pass, and or just write honest to goodness, just write a post office bill of some kind, right? Something that's so simple that everybody will sign on to it. Like starter pack congressional bills. Nope, none. So it tells you something about who these folks are, right? There's show horses and there's workhorses in politics. It's pretty clear that Jim Jordan wants to be a show horse. And look, that's what they ran in New York yesterday. And as Tricia puts it in the chat, it didn't go well for Democrats either. Look, because a lot of Congress people are not good in public. Like, they're pretty good on the campaign trail when they do it, when they've got their campaign hat on working out of that office. But when they're like a legislator, they are not prone to being like, hey, let's make a great experience for people, who are interacting with us. That's not their thing. Their thing is to say a lot, talk a lot. There's a lot of point making going on for these folks. And the hearing yesterday, as Tricia said, she watched it. I watched a bunch of it too. Was just chaos and nonsense and useless. Yeah. And look,
people
I think
talking over each other and points of order and just
people yelling at Republicans or yelling at Democrats about things. And look, Democrats should be yelled at about things, and Democrats should be happy to be yelled at about things. They should say, "You're right. You care about this. Let's fix it. Let's get working on it." Or, "We disagree on this, and thanks for your passion." Like, that's what they ought to do. and there should be more field hearings. Now, the thing I appreciate about this for Jim Jordan is he wanted to have a field hearing. Now he picks the ridiculous thing, which is to go to New York, as if Congress should be worrying about what's going on with the policies in New York that, by the way, have caused crime to go down in the last 10 months, not to go up. But that's probably not the thing that they should be doing. There's a lot of issues in this country where there should be some hearings happening. You could have one over in Ohio where there was a toxic spill from a train. How about throwing a congressional hearing over there, Jim?
Yeah. Because
that really does matter to people, and bring Congress people there. How about doing something else down at the border instead of a silly little stunt with your flak jackets on? Actually meet with some of the people who are influenced by these things. How about gun shootings? How about violence that happens in the city of Columbus, Ohio, where the crime rate is significantly higher than New York City, because Jim Jordan's from Ohio. So it's not about having congressional hearings and field trips. They should do it. I wish they did more of it. I wish it was built into the system. Look, if you're an average person, you've probably had zero contact with your representative, either your senator or your federal House representative. Probably haven't spoken to him ever been near them, ever touched their hand, because they're mostly insular from the people they represent. And your chances of seeing them or talking to them are so slim. Now, fortunately, I'm now represented by someone, we had redistricting, and I'm now represented by someone who doesn't do it. He's a great congressman, and he gives all kinds of access to his life and his work, and travels around and does coffee dates and all this kind of stuff, makes himself very accessible. But most people don't have that opportunity, and they should. All of our politicians are too insular from the people who want to reach out to them. So applauding them for that, but being so ineffectual, picking absolutely the wrong things, and being some kind of a fighter. Look, I mean, I'm not running against the guy. I'm not going to move to Ohio and run against Jim Jordan, but somebody who lives in Ohio should be running against Jim Jordan on a regular basis. And if you know somebody, we'll have them on the podcast, and we'll travel around in a bus and we'll pull up and cheer them on and support them. We'd love to do that, because these kinds of characters set the agenda for the Republican Party. And it really is something that has to be noticed and called out and paid attention to, because they're feeding an entire political and entertainment system on the conservative right. And it's something that we all need to be aware of and talking about.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be great if we could just debate policies and ideas, but right now it's just a lot of political theater and fighting over the wrong things. Yeah.
And look, I guess if you're going to do theater, New York's the place to do it, baby, because anybody can be a star, right? It's the town. Yeah. It's the town where theater is born. So, good for you, right? And I'm all personally, Dan, I'm all for a little political theater. We need some of it, but good theater, when you experience it, it moves you and motivates you, right? It touches somewhere deeply in your spirit and your heart, and the theater drives people to better human engagement. So let's have more political theater. Yes, less Excel spreadsheets and more theater for our ideas to move and motivate people.
An example of that is yesterday in Tennessee, there was a bunch of our friends and tens of thousands of people gathered for a piece of political theater where they marched on the Capitol and made a big show of things with the goal to motivate lawmakers to do something about gun violence, to save literal lives of children in schools.
Yes.
And so, political theater is great when it's used to motivate people to do something for the common good. But when
you write some songs, you have some, you have some makeup, you do some lighting, you get a bus. You get a bus, you get a one of those areas down there where the orchestra plays, and you take Congress to Broadway and you do a whole thing, right? So I'm being very, very serious in a lighthearted way. We really do need more of that in our politics, right? Because that's how human beings experience movement and motivation. There should be some level of entertainment. Now, you have to do your work. Of course you do your work. But you talk to any playwright, you talk to any actor in theater, you talk to any performer in a musical, and they will tell you about all the work they do in the background. And then the theatrical performance work is then paying off to accomplish the goal they wanted to accomplish. A really great thing. That's what we need more of in our politics, because when most people hear politics, they feel left out, they feel pretty dumb, and they feel pretty bored. And when you feel excluded and bored and uninformed about something, it tends to not motivate you. And there's some reasons why in politics people want voters in the population to not feel particularly motivated, right? Because if you can get to a point where you're motivating the right people for the outcomes that you want, it's easier to accomplish something. You may not always want to be motivating everyone, right? A good theater experience doesn't invite everyone on the stage. I have been to those experimental theaters where that happens and everyone's part of it. And the fourth wall or third wall or second wall or whatever it is broken and you're all part of it. Yeah, not always so great. So I get it. Like we live in a big, complicated world and it's really difficult and inclusion is hard and understanding is hard. But honestly, some playwrights, some TV show script writers helping to cast a vision for these ideas and any bill that's coming forward. Look, because they tried to do this on January 6th. Remember when they were they brought in TV producers to figure out how to produce the January 6th hearing? And they did well, but they stayed in the frame. Can you imagine the January 6th hearings Broadway style? Boy, that would be... That would really be something.
January 6th, the musical.
January 6th. Oh, I love that idea. All right. So hats off to your theater and 2 thumbs down on the performance of that theatrical endeavor. It didn't really work. Yeah, so SQ MIDI in the chat says we need Dems to do more and better communicating, be positive and negative opposite of the GOP. Yeah, look, I mean, politics is not always seen as a communication business. It's seen as internal work, and they absolutely need, for all appropriate ways, a marketing department would be really great. Like other businesses and industries have retail, and then they have R&D, and they have development, and they have sales, and then they have marketing, right? Where it tells people, hey, this is a good thing. You should know about it. Here's what you need to understand. There's almost none of that comes in our political world. And as someone who thinks that marketing and advertising is a really good thing, because almost everything you own that you like, that's made your life better, somehow someone made it available to you, let you know it existed, and told you that this was something you might benefit from. And, you bought a lot of junk too, but all the good stuff is because somebody made it available to you. And our politics doesn't feel like it's good for a lot of people. And so much of that is because most of us are left out of the system altogether. And if you were thinking about the citizenry as your consumer, you would think about it in a much, much different way.
Yeah.
All right. That's the political lecture for the day.
Yeah, well, thanks for everyone in the chat for hanging with us. Really active chat today. Alex, Ernest, Tracy, Tony, SQ MIDI.
Did you get Mike Edward D? Good to see you back, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks for hanging with us. And we've got, what are we doing tomorrow, Doug?
Oh, we're talking about faith tomorrow. That's what we're doing tomorrow. We're going to try to have a little conversation with some of the people who visited the state capitol over there in Tennessee and get a little update. We'll talk about this more tomorrow, but Dan, you and I both wanted to go, and I don't know, I couldn't figure out how to make my life work and go to Tennessee at the same time. So I didn't go, but I'd love to hear from the people that are there. So we're going to try to get a little report back on what happened there and the activism that's around it. And then we're going to talk about economics and taxes on Thursday on the economics themed day, because this is, as we said, big tax week. So that's our week up and coming. Lots of things happening over at Vote Common Good. If you're not on the email list, we'd love you to be on the email list. If you're not already contributing to our good work with your stories, we have a place for you to share your story. We have a lot of surveys that we do, a lot of things we're asking people to tell us about in your own life. We're working on some curriculum and some projects and some things that are coming and going. We're going to work on a big Christian nationalism effort in Iowa to really be pushing on the candidates in the presidential candidates on the Republican side. in Iowa, and all kinds of things, and a curriculum for you to talk about difficult conversations with those you love. Lots of things happening and going on that are outside the scope of these podcasts. So if you're not already over there at Vote Common Good, go over to the website, sign up for things, get on the deal, make a donation if you're into that kind of thing. And if you don't know where to watch this, that would be the best place. If you're somebody who, if you're into like hack your life to make your life better, the best place you can hack your life for the Vote Common Good podcast is over on our YouTube channel. That's our favorite place for you to do it, because it makes the shareability of these podcasts and all the work that we do so much better. So you watching over there versus watching on Twitter or Facebook or Twitch or one of these other places helps us in our overall work. So we get it if you just got it tuned up in your Facebook profile. And so if you're not subscribed over there on YouTube yet, if you're not a YouTuber, I get it, but go subscribe and watch it there when you can. We'd love to see that.
Because YouTube is where all the good comments come in. We've got this one that says, never seen Reverend Doug with his hat off. Well, here you go.
Tony, well, hats off to you, my friend.
Hats off to you, Tony.
Well, thanks for noticing, Tony. And thanks for calling me Reverend Doug. I mean, Danny Strong. All right.
Take care, everybody.